I mean, I think in many ways it was the detail and precision of what we were seeing in terms of Russian planning, combined with what I was trying to describe before, which was Vladimir Putin's absolute conviction that that the window was closing for him to use force to try to shape Ukraine's orientation, and his conviction that Ukrainian resistance would be, weak and indecisive in some ways. And when the president has done that quite selectively, I think it's helped to deny Putin something that I watched over many years him do quite adeptly, which was to create false narratives, to disarm what has been a useful weapon for him before. It is irresponsible, it's very risky, it's dangerous when people talk too much, whether it's leaking in private or talking in public about specific intelligence issues. I mean, both the White House and the Department of Defense have spoken to this publicly, so I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, the only thing, though, that I would say is that it's a big mistake to underestimate the significant intelligence capabilities that the Ukrainians themselves have. This is their country. They have a lot more information than we do and a lot more intelligence than we in the United States and amongst our allies do. It was a profound mistake. It was Putin's biggest mistake in planning for this invasion and then in launching it to underestimate Ukrainians. And I think it's equally a mistake for any of us to underestimate what they bring to the table in intelligence terms in defending their own country. I mean, what I would stress at the start is we don't see, as an intelligence community, practical evidence at this point of Russian planning for deployment or even potential use of tactical nuclear weapons. But, given the kind of saber rattling that you described, we've heard from the Russian leadership, we can't take lightly those possibilities. And so we stay very sharply focused as an intelligence service, as I know our counterparts in allied countries do, on those possibilities at a moment when, as I said before, the stakes are very high for Putin's Russia. And those risks, I think, in this second phase of the conflict are serious and shouldn't be underestimated. But again, we don't see practical evidence of preparations for that, at this stage as well. I think what the experience, the bitter experience in many ways, of Putin's Russia in Ukraine over the last 10 or 11 weeks has done is demonstrate that friendship actually does have some limits. Because I think it strikes us anyway that Xi Jinping is a little bit unsettled by the reputational damage that can come to China by association with the brutishness of Russia's aggression against Ukrainians, unsettled certainly by the economic uncertainty that's been produced by the war. Clearly the Chinese leadership is trying to look carefully at what lessons they should draw from Ukraine about their own ambitions in Taiwan. I don't for a minute think that it's eroded Xi's determination over time to gain control over Taiwan. But I think it's something that's affecting their calculation about how and when they go about doing that as well. I suspect that they've been surprised by Russian military performance. I suspect they've been struck by the ways in which Ukrainians, through a kind of whole of society effort, have resisted. I think they've been struck by the way in which particularly the transatlantic alliance has come together to impose economic costs on Russia as a result of that aggression. So I think, these are things that they're weighing very carefully right now. As I said before, and I profoundly believe this, and more importantly, I believe the president believes this, that the biggest geopolitical challenge we face over the long term as a country is Xi Jinping's China. That's not to suggest that we should in any way underestimate the challenge posed by Putin's Russia, for example. I mean, he demonstrates in a very disturbing way that declining powers can be at least as disruptive as rising ones. But I think there's no question in my mind that over the long term, it's China that's the biggest geopolitical challenge. I come to you today from Washington, D.C., a city which remains as self-absorbed as ever. It's a place where, as one of my predecessors at CIA, Bob Gates, once put it, you can still see someone walking down Lover's Lane holding his own hand. It's also a place not known for brevity in public speaking. Whenever I think of that elusive virtue, I'm reminded of a story about the famous author George Bernard Shaw. It seems that Shaw was hosting an event in London one evening, and the first speaker came up to him and asked how long he should speak for. And Shaw told him he should probably limit his remarks to about half an hour. The speaker looked at him in horror and exclaimed, "Half an hour? How am I supposed to tell them everything I know in half an hour?" Shaw paused and replied, "In your case, my advice would be to speak very slowly." In my case, you don't have to worry about me going on for more than half an hour, even if I speak very slowly. This is my first public speech as director of CIA after almost exactly 1 year in the job. And it comes in a year which marks the 75th anniversary of CIA's founding by President Harry Truman. What I'd like to do with all of you today is reflect a little on the role of an intelligence agency in a democracy at a moment of profound change on the international landscape, one of those rare plastic moments of genuine transformation that come along once or twice a century, similar in its sweep to the moment after World War II in which Truman created the Central Intelligence Agency. I should note at the outset a couple of unusual features of this speech. First, I stand here not as a career intelligence professional or a political figure, but as the first career diplomat to become director of CIA. That is less strange than you might think. Over more than 3 decades as a diplomat in the Middle East and Russia, and serving as a senior official in administrations of both parties, I developed enormous respect for my CIA colleagues. I served alongside them in hard places around the world. It was their skill at collection and analysis that often gave me an edge as a negotiator, their partnership that helped make me an effective ambassador, their insights and actions that helped me make thoughtful choices on the most difficult policy issues. I hope that my experience as a diplomat and policymaker is making me an effective CIA director, able to understand what matters most to policymakers and how to navigate other countries. That's at least how I see things. My wife and daughters, always my most loving and discerning critics, sometimes find it highly amusing that I'm leading an intelligence service, the world of James Bond and Jason Bourne and Jack Ryan. The truth, as they point out, is that I'm most comfortable driving a 2013 Subaru Outback at posted speed limits, and that the height of technological achievement for me are those rare occasions when I can get the Roku remote to work. The second unusual feature is that I'm making a public speech at all. Intelligence agencies are supposed to collect secrets and keep them, not talk too much about their work. We usually operate in the shadows, out of sight and out of mind. Our successes obscured, our failures painfully visible, and our sacrifices often unknown. But I'm convinced that in our democracy, where trust in institutions is in such short supply, it's essential to explain ourselves as best we can and to be as open as possible. Now, a certain amount of discretion is necessary, given the nature of our business and our responsibility to protect the agents and officers who risk their lives in support of our mission. But we have an obligation to help the citizens on whose trust we rely to understand what we do and how we organize our priorities. We have an obligation to be straight, not just about our accomplishments, but also about our mistakes. And we have an obligation to explain our mission. I think a recent Georgia Tech graduate who now serves with us described our mission well. Similar to Georgia Tech, she said, at CIA we focus on progress and service. We see challenging problems and we fight to find a solution to make America a safer place. She's exactly right. At CIA, we are in the foreign intelligence business. We gather information or secrets about the plans of foreign actors. Then we analyze that information for policymakers to help protect our country. I want to underscore a word I just mentioned, foreign. Our focus is on collecting and analyzing information about foreign actors, not Americans.